I had forgotten to tell my son the security cameras were back online, and the next morning when I checked the footage, my heart broke. My son Ryan and his wife Jessica were caught executing a cold, calculated plan, fake an electrical shock, and stage a fatal tumble down the basement stairs to make my death look like an accident. The boy I'd raised alone after his mother's death sat there calculating insurance payouts as if my life were a commodity. In that moment I realized I wasn't just confronting family betrayal, I had become the next target of a serial killer. What they didn't expect was that the man they meant to bury had quietly laid a trap that would make them walk right into it. Pause for a moment and imagine you're Steven sitting in that workshop watching your own son plan your murder on camera. What's your next move? Comment below with your thoughts and tell me where you're watching from. The satisfaction of a job well done has always been my greatest reward. Standing in my workshop this Thursday afternoon, I ran my weathered hands along the newly repaired security camera system, feeling that familiar pride from 40 years of electrical work. The October chill crept through the windows, but inside my home, the house I built with these hands in 1995, everything felt warm and secure. For 2 weeks, those cameras had been expensive decorations after a power surge knocked out the main circuit. Today, after 3 hours of careful rewiring, every lens was crystal clear, every microphone picking up the slightest sound. At 65, my eyes need reading glasses, but my hands still know electrical systems better than men half my age. This house represented everything I'd worked for. Every wire I'd run through these walls, every outlet I'd installed, it was all mine. When Margaret died 8 years ago, I'd thought about selling. But this place held too many memories. Besides, Ryan needed somewhere to land when his life fell apart, and what kind of father would I be if I didn't help my only son? Car doors slamming pulled me from my thoughts. 5:30 sharp, Ryan and Jessica were punctual for our weekly dinners. I wiped my hands and headed for the front door, hearing Jessica's laugh from the driveway. That laugh used to charm me when Ryan first brought her home 3 years ago. Lately, something about it felt calculated. Dad, Ryan's voice carried forced cheerfulness I'd been noticing more often. How's the old homestead? I embraced my son, feeling how thin he'd gotten. Can't complain. Been keeping busy with some electrical work around the house. You know how I hate letting things pile up. Jessica stepped forward with that perfect smile that never reached her eyes. Steven, you work too hard. A man your age shouldn't be climbing around fixing things. That's what professionals are for. Professionals charge what I make in a week for work I can do in an afternoon, I replied, leading them inside. Besides, keeps these old hands busy. Over dinner, I watched them more carefully than usual. Maybe it was the electrician in me were trained to notice when circuits aren't running right. Jessica kept steering conversation toward the house, asking about property values, wondering if I'd considered updating insurance. Ryan barely made eye contact, giving vague answers about his job search that didn't add up. Any luck with those interviews? I asked, cutting my pot roast. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. Market's tough, Dad, but I've got promising leads. That's wonderful, Jessica interjected smoothly. Steven, you're so generous with that monthly allowance. $700 goes such a long way. The way she said it made my skin crawl, like it was their due, not my choice to help family. Speaking of the house, Jessica continued, have you thought about updating your security system? These old cameras probably aren't very reliable anymore. I was about to mention I'd just spent the afternoon getting the system back in perfect working order when the phone rang. Mrs. Patterson from next door, frantic about a water leak in her basement. Could I take a look? Her late husband had always handled these things. Of course, Helen, I'll be right over. I hung up and turned back to Ryan and Jessica, who were already gathering their coats. Sorry, kids. Duty calls. No problem, Dad, Ryan said, still avoiding my eyes. We should get going anyway. I walked them to the door, that nagging feeling growing stronger. Something was off about tonight. Jessica's probing about security. Ryan's obvious discomfort. But Mrs. Patterson needed help and neighbors came first. As their car pulled away, I realized I'd completely forgotten to mention the cameras were working again. The phone call had interrupted my train of thought entirely. Tomorrow I'd tell them over coffee and run a proper test of the whole system. After 40 years of troubleshooting electrical problems, I'd learned the best way to catch issues was observing everything when people thought no one was watching. Friday morning arrived with that crisp October clarity that made everything seem sharper. I'd slept restlessly, my mind turning over last night's strange dinner tension. By 10 o'clock, I was in my workshop with fresh coffee, ready to run that comprehensive security system test. The multiple monitors came to life with satisfying clarity, every angle of my house displayed in high-definition audio pickup so clear I could hear the refrigerator humming. 40 years of electrical work had taught me to appreciate quality installations, and this system rivaled anything professionals charge thousands to install. I was adjusting camera angles when I heard a key in my front door. The timestamp read 10:15 a.m. Through the living room camera, I watched Ryan and Jessica let themselves in, moving with casual confidence of people who belonged here. But they weren't supposed to be here. Ryan had mentioned job interviews, Jessica errands. My finger hovered over the intercom when something in their behavior stopped me cold. They were looking around cautiously, checking corners, listening for my presence. This wasn't family dropping by for a friendly visit. Then it hit me. They had no idea the cameras were working. Last night's phone call had interrupted me before mentioning the repair. They still believed the system was dead. They thought they were invisible. "Perfect," Jessica said, her voice crystal clear through the audio. "He's not here, and those cameras are still broken from the power surge." Ryan looked uncomfortable, shifting nervously. "Going through his personal papers feels wrong, Jess." "Wrong." Jessica's laugh was nothing like the charming sound I'd known. This was cold, calculating. "Ryan, we've discussed this. Sunday morning we make this look like an electrical accident in the basement. Your father's always tinkering down there, completely believable." My blood turned to ice. Sunday morning, electrical accident. They weren't planning to steal from me, they were planning to kill me. The life insurance alone is $200,000. Jessica continued pulling out folders from my bedroom desk. Plus the house value, over $600,000 total. Enough to pay your gambling debts and start fresh. Ryan's face went pale. "I know the money would solve everything, but it's my father, Jessica. Your father who's controlled your life for 32 years. She snapped. Harold Peterson was harder to convince than you are, and that worked perfectly. Harold Peterson. The name meant nothing to me, but her casual tone made my skin crawl. "Who's Harold Peterson?" Ryan asked. Jessica smiled, that perfect smile I'd once found charming. "An old man in Toledo with a nice house and trusting nature. Death certificate said natural causes, no investigation needed. Dorothy Mitchell in Akron was even easier, poor thing, just fell downstairs after signing over her property." The room spun around me. This wasn't desperation or family greed. This was a pattern. Jessica was a predator, and I was just her latest target. "You never told me they actually died," Ryan whispered. "What did you think happened?" "They moved to Florida." Jessica's voice dripped contempt. "Ryan, grow up. This is how the world works. The weak get consumed by the strong." I watched my son, the boy I'd raised alone, nod slowly in agreement. Whatever good had been in him was being systematically destroyed by this woman's poison. Sunday morning, 8 a.m. Jessica continued spreading documents on my coffee table like a general planning campaign. Electrical shock in the basement workshop, fall downstairs, delayed 911 call. By noon, we'll be grieving family members with a profitable future. 2 days. I had 2 days before they planned to murder me in my own home. As I sat surrounded by the tools and skills that had built my life, I realized forgetting to mention those cameras might have been the luckiest mistake I'd ever made. Jessica had killed twice before, but she'd never targeted someone who could see her coming. The hunter had just become the hunted, and she didn't even know it yet. The clock on my dashboard read 12:45 p.m. as I pulled into the parking lot of Sullivan & Associates. My hands were steadier than they'd been all morning because now I had a plan. The shock of discovery was behind me. What lay ahead was action. Catherine Sullivan's office smelled of leather and determination. She was younger than I had expected, maybe 50, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. I'd called ahead, used the word emergency, and she'd cleared her afternoon. "Mr. Brooks, you mentioned a murder conspiracy on the phone. I need to hear everything." I played the recordings on my phone. Jessica's voice filled the room. Sunday morning, 8 a.m. Electrical shock in the basement workshop, fall downstairs, delayed 911 call. Kate's expression hardened with each word. "This isn't desperate family greed, Mr. Brooks. This is professional elder abuse with homicide. You mentioned," she referenced previous victims. "Harold Peterson in Toledo, Dorothy Mitchell in Akron. Both died after property transfers." She was already typing on her computer. "I'm scheduling an emergency competency evaluation with Dr. Hamilton. If they're planning to claim you're mentally unfit, we need medical documentation proving otherwise. Can you be there by 2:30? "Absolutely." "Good. I'm also calling my private investigator. If this woman has done this before, there'll be records." Dr. Hamilton's clinic was a 15-minute drive through familiar neighborhoods that suddenly felt foreign. Everything looked the same, but I was seeing it all through the lens of someone marked for death in 36 hours. The cognitive evaluation was thorough memory tests, problem-solving exercises, questions about current events. Dr. Hamilton had been my physician for over a decade, and her concern was genuine. "Stephen, your cognitive function is excellent, better than most men 20 years younger." She signed the official documentation with authority. "What you've described isn't paranoia. It's survival instinct responding to a real threat." By 3:30, I was back in Kate's office, where her investigator had news that changed everything. "Jessica Williams doesn't exist," he announced, spreading documents across Kate's desk. "Real name is Jennifer Walsh. She's wanted in connection with 2 suspicious deaths, Harold Peterson in Toledo and Dorothy Mitchell in Akron. Both cases remain open investigations. Kate leaned forward. Outstanding warrants. Active warrants in Ohio. Financial fraud, elder abuse, and now suspected homicide. Local police can arrest on site. The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. Jennifer Walsh was a predator who specialized in elderly victims, and Ryan had delivered me to her like a gift-wrapped present. "What's our timeline?" Kate asked. "They're planning the murder for Sunday morning." That gives us, I checked my watch, 41 hours. More than enough. Kate was already reaching for her phone. "I'm calling Detective Frank Morrison. He heads the Elder Crimes Unit. With existing warrants and your recorded evidence, we can have her in custody before she knows what hit her." "What about Ryan?" Kate's expression softened slightly. "Conspiracy to commit murder carries serious time, but if he cooperates and testifies against her, there might be options. The recordings make it clear she's the mastermind." By 4:30, our strategy was set. Tomorrow morning, Detective Morrison would review all evidence. The medical evaluation protected me against competency challenges. The outstanding warrants gave police immediate arrest authority. "Mr. Brooks," Kate said, as I prepared to leave, "you've done something remarkable here. Most victims of elder abuse never see it coming. You not only detected the threat you're stopping a serial killer." Walking to my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the satisfaction of a plan coming together. Jennifer Walsh had made one crucial mistake. She'd assumed I was just another helpless old man waiting to be victimized. Tomorrow she'd learn that some prey fights back. The evening air carried the scent of autumn leaves and possibility. In 37 hours, either I'd be dead in my basement or Jennifer Walsh would be in handcuffs. I knew which outcome I was betting on. The house felt different when I returned that evening. Same walls, same furniture, but now every corner held the potential for evidence. I moved through my pre-dinner routine with practiced normalcy, while my enhanced surveillance system captured everything in crystal clarity. Ryan and Jessica arrived at 6 sharp, their Friday evening smiles as predictable as clockwork. But tonight, I was listening for more than dinner conversation. "How was your day, Dad?" Ryan asked, settling into his usual chair. "Productive," I replied, which was the understatement of the century. "Took care of some important business in town." Jessica's eyes sharpened slightly. "Oh, anything interesting? Just old man errands. Doctor visits, paperwork. You know how it is." The lie came easily. Let them think I was just another elderly fool shuffling through his remaining days. During dinner, Jessica excused herself to make a phone call. Through the enhanced audio system, her voice came through perfectly from the kitchen. "Vinny, it's Jennifer. Sunday morning is confirmed." "Yes, 8 a.m. sharp." "No, the old man suspects nothing. Make sure your cleanup crew is ready by 10. "Vinny, another player in this deadly game." I filed the name away as Jessica returned to the table with that practiced smile. "Sorry about that. Work call." After dinner, they moved to the living room while I cleaned dishes, my ears tuned to every word through the surveillance system. "I can't keep doing this." Ryan's voice was barely above a whisper. Looking him in the eye, knowing what we're planning, "Ryan, we've been over this." Jessica's patience was wearing thin. "You owe $50,000 to people who break legs for late payments. Your deadline is Monday morning. What exactly do you think happens if we don't follow through? 50,000 gambling debts." Suddenly, Ryan's desperation made perfect sense. "There has to be another way," he pleaded. "There is no other way." Jessica's voice turned sharp. "You think I enjoy this. You think I wanted to become what I am. But this is survival, Ryan. Your father dies, or you do. Choose." The casual brutality of it staggered me. My own son reduced to this impossible calculation. "Tell me about Vinny," Ryan said after a long silence. "Vincent Castellano. He handles the technical side, forged documents, cleanup operations, witness management. He's been doing this for 20 years across 6 states. Never been caught. Witness management. Sometimes neighbors get curious. Sometimes old friends ask too many questions. Vinny handles those situations. The scope of this operation was becoming clear. This wasn't just murder. It was organized crime with a body count stretching across state lines. Sunday morning, 8 a.m. Jessica continued, her voice now businesslike. "You'll be here early, supposedly checking on your father. I'll be in the kitchen making coffee. He'll go down to the basement workshop like he always does. And then, electrical accident. The workshop has exposed wiring old equipment. Very believable for a man his age who insists on doing his own repairs. He'll be found at the bottom of the basement stairs. What if someone investigates? They won't. Vinny will be here by 10 to ensure the scene looks perfect. By noon, we'll be grieving family members planning a funeral. I stood at the kitchen sink mechanically washing the same plate over and over as they planned my death, with the efficiency of a business meeting. The insurance money clears in 30 days, Jessica added. House sale can happen within 60. We'll be in another state with new identities before anyone thinks to ask questions. New identities? Of course. Jennifer Walsh was probably just one name in a long list of assumed personas. By 9 o'clock, they were gone, leaving me alone with the weight of what I'd learned. I spent the next hour reviewing every recording, backing up files to multiple locations, creating an unbreakable chain of evidence. 34 hours. That's all the time I had left before they expected to find me dead at the bottom of my own basement stairs. But Vincent Castellano and his cleanup crew were about to discover that some old men don't die quietly. Saturday morning brought the kind of clarity that comes before a storm. I was up before dawn, coffee in hand, reviewing the final checklist that would determine whether I lived or died in 20 hours. The basement workshop, their chosen killing ground, needed additional coverage. I installed 2 micro cameras in the ceiling, joists positioning them to capture every angle where they planned to stage my accident. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd chosen the one room in the house where I had complete technical advantage. By 8:30, I had backup recording systems throughout the house, each one invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for them. Cloud storage ensured that even if they destroyed my equipment, the evidence would survive. Detective Morrison's office smelled of old coffee and determination. He was exactly what I'd hoped for, a weathered professional who'd seen enough elder abuse cases to recognize the real thing when it walked through his door. Mr. Brooks, I've been investigating crimes against seniors for 15 years. What you've uncovered here is the most sophisticated operation I've ever seen. I played him the recordings. His expression grew darker with each revelation. Jennifer Walsh? He said, pulling up files on his computer. We've been tracking her across 3 states. Outstanding warrants for fraud and suspected homicide in Toledo and Akron. Your evidence gives us everything we need. What's the plan? Tomorrow, 7 a.m. We position tactical teams around your property. The moment she and your son arrive, we move. With the warrants and your recorded conspiracy evidence, this is airtight. What about Vinny Castellano? Morrison smiled grimly. Vincent Castellano has been on our radar for 2 decades. If he shows up for cleanup duty, we'll be waiting. This could break up an entire criminal network. The legal protection took another hour. Kate had prepared documents that locked down every aspect of my financial life. Accounts frozen against unauthorized access. Property transfers, blocked medical directives ironclad. They can't touch anything now, she assured me. Even if something goes wrong tomorrow, your assets are completely protected. What about the recordings? Legally obtained on your own property with reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. They're admissible and devastating. Any decent prosecutor would call this case a gift. By noon, I was back home surrounded by the quiet hum of hidden cameras and backup systems. Everything was ready. Professional law enforcement, legal protection, medical documentation, and enough evidence to put Jennifer Walsh away for life. I walked through my house, really looked at it for the first time in days. Every room held memories of the life I'd built here, the son I'd raised, the future I'd planned. Tomorrow that son would walk through my front door intending to watch me die. But he'd be walking into a trap 40 years in the making. The phone rang. Detective Morrison's voice was calm but urgent. Mr. Brooks, we just got word that Castellano's crew is already in Cleveland. They're taking this seriously. So are we. Yes, sir, we are. Try to get some rest tonight. Tomorrow's going to be intense, but you've done everything right. This woman's killing spree ends with you. After hanging up, I stood in my workshop surrounded by the tools that had built my life and would now save it. Jennifer Walsh had made one fatal miscalculation. She'd assumed I was just another helpless victim. Tomorrow morning, she'd discover that some prey comes equipped with teeth. 20 hours to go. I was ready. The Last Supper. That's what kept running through my mind as I set the table for 3. In 14 hours, Ryan and Jessica expected to find me dead at the bottom of my basement stairs. Instead, they'd be the ones facing a very different kind of ending. They arrived at 6 sharp Ryan, carrying flowers a touch. That might have been sweet if I didn't know he was planning to attend my funeral tomorrow afternoon. Dad, you look tired, Jessica said, settling into her chair with practiced concern. Are you feeling all right? Just fine, I replied, serving the pot roast I'd spent the afternoon preparing. Looking forward to a quiet Sunday at home. The irony was lost on them, but not on me. During dinner, Jessica pulled out a manila folder. Stephen, I know this might seem sudden, but we've been thinking about your insurance situation. These forms just need a quick signature to update your beneficiaries. I glanced at the documents, legal-looking papers that would probably sign away my life savings. What's the rush? Can't this wait until Monday? Well, the agent said there might be rate changes if we don't process these by tomorrow. Her smile was perfect, practiced deadly. It's really just a formality. Ryan stared at his plate, unable to meet my eyes. His hands shook slightly as he cut his meat. You know, Jessica, I said conversationally, I've been having some memory issues lately. Sometimes I forget the simplest things. Just yesterday, I completely forgot to mention something important to you both. Her eyes sharpened. Oh, what was that? I'll remember eventually. I said, taking another bite. These things come back to you when you least expect them. After dinner, they moved to the living room, while I cleaned up their voices, carrying clearly through my enhanced audio system. He seemed more confused than usual, Jessica whispered. Did you see how he struggled with those insurance forms? Maybe we don't need to go through with this, Ryan said desperately. If he's getting worse naturally, maybe we just wait. Ryan, her voice cut like a blade, your creditors don't care about your father's natural decline. They want $50,000 Monday morning, or they start breaking bones. We stick to the plan. 8 a.m. tomorrow. 8 a.m. sharp. You'll be here early checking on him like the devoted son. I'll be making coffee in the kitchen. He goes down to the basement like he always does on Sunday mornings. And then, electrical accident. The wiring down there is ancient, perfect for what we need. He falls down the stairs. We call 911 in a panic. By the time paramedics arrive, it's too late. I stood at the sink mechanically washing dishes while they choreographed my death. What about afterward? Ryan asked. Vinny arrives at 10 for cleanup. Makes sure everything looks perfect. We play the grieving family collect the insurance money, sell the house. By Christmas, we're in Florida with new identities. At 8:45, Jessica stepped outside to make a final call. Through the window, I watched her pace the driveway. Vinny, it's Jennifer. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. Yes, everything's ready. The basement workshop, just like we discussed. 10 a.m. for cleanup. Make sure you bring the electrical equipment to stage the scene properly. When she came back inside, her mask was firmly in place. Well, we should let you get your rest, she said, kissing my cheek with lips that might as well have been ice. Big day tomorrow. Yes, I agreed. I have a feeling tomorrow will be very memorable. After they left, I walked through my house one final time, checking every camera, every backup system, every piece of evidence that would end Jennifer Walsh's killing spree forever. 11 hours. In 11 hours, Detective Morrison's tactical team would be in position. In 13 hours, Ryan and Jessica would walk through my front door expecting to commit murder. Instead, they'd walk into the most comprehensive trap I'd ever built. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, something I rarely did, and sat in my favorite chair. Tomorrow morning, either justice would be served or I'd be dead. But tonight, for these final hours, I was still Stephen Brooks, and I was ready for war. The countdown was almost over. 7 a.m. sharp. I was waiting in the living room when I heard their key in the lock. Ryan entered First Flowers and handed his alibi prop for being here early. Jessica followed, carrying a thermos of coffee and wearing the mask of a devoted daughter-in-law. Dad, you're up early, Ryan said, his voice carefully cheerful. We thought we'd check on you before you killed me at 8 o'clock, I said calmly. The silence that followed was absolute. The flowers slipped from Ryan's fingers, scattering across my carpet like evidence at a crime scene. Jessica recovered first, that practiced smile sliding into place. Stephen, what a strange thing to say. Are you feeling confused this morning? Not confused at all. I reached for the tablet beside my chair. Let me show you exactly how clear my thinking is. The first recording filled the room. Jessica's voice crystal clear through my enhanced audio system. Sunday morning, 8 a.m. Electrical shock in the basement workshop. Fall downstairs, delayed 911 call. Ryan's face went white as bone. Jessica's mask finally cracked. You've been recording us, she whispered. For 3 days. Every word, every plan, every confession. I scrolled through the files. Harold Peterson in Toledo. Dorothy Mitchell in Akron. Your real name, Jennifer Walsh. Outstanding warrants in 3 states. This is impossible, Jessica snarled. Those cameras have been broken for weeks. I fixed them Thursday afternoon. I forgot to mention it Friday morning, the luckiest mistake of my life. I stood feeling stronger than I had in years. You see, Jennifer, you made one fatal error. You assumed I was just another helpless old man. Ryan collapsed into a chair, his face buried in his hands. Dad, I'm so sorry. I never wanted this. The gambling debts, the threats. $50,000, I said. That's what my life was worth to you. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Ryan's voice broke. She said it would look natural, that no one would get hurt. No one would get hurt. I played another recording, Jessica's cold voice describing Harold Peterson's death. Dorothy Mitchell's accident. She's killed before Ryan. You weren't helping her commit fraud. You were helping her commit murder. Jessica's composure shattered completely. You don't understand what it's like out there. These old fools sitting on fortunes while young people struggle. So you decided to speed up the inheritance process. They were going to die anyway. I just made it profitable. The confession was perfect, captured in high definition by cameras she never knew existed. But I wasn't done yet. Tell me about Vincent Castellano, I said. Who but her eyes gave her away? Vinny, your cleanup specialist. The man you called last night to coordinate removing evidence after my murder. Ryan looked up sharply. Murder? You said it would be an accident. It would have been, Jessica snapped. If your father hadn't turned into some kind of surveillance expert, Actually, I said, checking my watch, Vinny's not coming. None of your network is operational anymore. As if on cue, the front door burst open. Detective Morrison entered with his tactical team weapons drawn, badges visible. Cleveland Police, nobody move. Kate Sullivan followed, carrying a briefcase full of legal documents. Jennifer Walsh, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, elder fraud, and outstanding warrants in the deaths of Harold Peterson and Dorothy Mitchell. The next few minutes were a blur of Miranda rights, handcuffs, and the systematic dismantling of a criminal enterprise that had operated across multiple states for years. How long have you known? Ryan asked as they cuffed him. Since Friday morning, I replied, when I heard you planning my death. You chose this Ryan. When she gave you the choice between my life and your debts, you chose the money. As they led him away, I felt something I hadn't expected, not satisfaction, but sadness. I'd raised that boy, loved him, sacrificed for him. But the man they were arresting wasn't my son anymore. He was a stranger who'd been willing to watch me die. Detective Morrison approached as the last of the tactical team cleared out. Mr. Brooks, it's over. We've arrested 6 members of the Castellano network across Ohio. This operation is finished. I looked around my living room, the same room where they'd planned my murder, where I'd gathered the evidence that saved my life. What happens now? Now you live, Morrison said simply, and Jennifer Walsh never kills again. Outside I could hear the neighbors gathering, drawn by the police presence. Soon there would be questions, reporters, a trial. But for now, in this moment, I was simply a man who'd refused to become a victim. The clock on my mantel read 7:45 a.m. 15 minutes ago I was supposed to be dead. Instead, I was finally completely alive. 6 months after the arrests, I sat in the courthouse gallery as Jennifer Walsh received a sentence of 25 years to life for multiple murders, elder abuse, and conspiracy. The judge's words, your calculated predation on vulnerable seniors, represents the worst of human nature hung in the air. When she glanced at me one last time, I saw no remorse, only cold calculation. Some people I'd learned cannot be redeemed. Ryan's sentencing was harder. He received 12 years for conspiracy and elder abuse. From the defendant's table, his eyes still held the boy I raised, not the man who'd helped plan my death. The judge reminded everyone that betrayal within families where trust is assumed deserves the sternest accountability. The Castellano Network's trials unfolded across 3 states. Vincent Castellano himself drew multiple life terms. The FBI estimated their operation had targeted more than 30 elderly victims over 2 decades. My covert recordings supplied the crucial evidence that dismantled the entire enterprise. Courtroom victories, however, were only the start of something larger. Change began in my own neighborhood with Mrs. Patterson, the widow, whose frantic phone call had set the rescue in motion. I installed a full security system in her house and taught her how to spot the red flags of elder fraud and manipulation. You've given me something I lost when Harold died, she told me, holding the safety checklist we'd built. The feeling that I can protect myself and make my own choices. Word spread quickly through Cleveland's senior community. Within months, I was consulting with families across the city, hardening homes, auditing finances, and briefing loved ones about predatory tactics. The local police invited me to speak at community meetings. Detective Morrison introduced me by saying I'd not only saved my own life, but shown how seniors could fight back against predators who assume they are helpless. The Ohio Attorney General's office asked me to help write elder protection protocols, and my story became central to a statewide awareness campaign. The message was simple and powerful. Age brings experience and practical skills to recognize and resist danger. Dr. Hamilton remained my physician and became a close friend and advocate. You've turned personal trauma into community purpose, she told me. That's not merely surviving, it's triumph. Kate Sullivan, my lawyer, and I led legal workshops teaching seniors how to protect assets and spot illicit schemes. My house transformed from a target into a fortress. The basement workshop that had been a planned murder scene became a training center, where I taught basic security and practical self-protection. Neighbors began checking on each other. We formed an unbreakable network of mutual support. Mrs. Patterson organized weekly coffee meetings where we exchanged suspicious activity reports and celebrated small victories. The sting of Ryan's betrayal never fully faded, but it became useful. It sharpened my understanding of how predators exploit emotional bonds and family dynamics. In every presentation I delivered, I stressed a hard truth. Sometimes the greatest threats arrive from those we trust most. Letters arrived from across the country, hundreds of notes from families who'd heard the story. One elderly man in Florida wrote that my example had empowered him to question his family's suspicious financial behavior and confront a grandson who'd been stealing from him. Those letters were daily reminders of why this work mattered. Jennifer Walsh had seen elderly people as disposable obstacles to wealth. Each senior who learned to defend themselves disproved that terrible assumption. 6 months earlier, I had been marked for death by my own family. Now I woke in a home bristling with security, surrounded by people who respected rather than exploited my decades of experience. My calendar was full speaking engagements, consultations, coffee dates with friends who valued my presence. The greatest victory wasn't merely surviving a murderous scheme. It was discovering that the truest family had been waiting in my community all along, ready to appreciate what I had to offer. Sometimes God places us in situations that test not just our survival, but our faith in humanity itself. Stephen's story reminds us that betrayal stories like this aren't just about crime, they're about the strength we discover when everything familiar becomes dangerous. When family turns against us, God provides other paths to safety and purpose. The most powerful lesson from Grandpa stories like Stephen's is that age isn't vulnerability, it's accumulated wisdom waiting for the right moment to shine. These betrayal stories teach us that predators often hide behind love, but genuine care never demands we surrender our safety or dignity. Stephen's technical skills, built over decades, became his salvation when family failed him. God works through our preparation and community connections. The forgotten camera announcement, the neighbor's emergency call, the professional relationships Stephen had cultivated, these weren't coincidences. They were divine appointments that saved his life and exposed a criminal network. Elder abuse happens because we assume age equals helplessness. But Grandpa's stories prove that experience, preparation, and faith create an unbeatable combination. When we honor our elders' wisdom instead of exploiting their trust, we build communities where predators cannot thrive. Stephen's transformation from victim to advocate shows us that God can use our darkest moments to illuminate paths of service and protection for others. Your turn to share wisdom. What betrayal stories or grandpa stories have shaped your understanding of family trust and resilience? Drop a comment below, sharing your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring life stories that remind us how strength can emerge from our greatest challenges. Which city are you listening from today? So I canceled my $150,000. Imagine this. You raise your daughter alone after your wife passes away, you pay for her education, support her dreams, and then she sends you an email saying you're not sophisticated enough for her wedding. Victoria suggested I watch her ceremony on live stream because my presence would embarrass her French in-laws. That was the moment this widowed father decided to teach his arrogant daughter about consequences. One letter of credit canceled. $150,000 in wedding funds gone. But the money was only the beginning of Victoria's lesson. The fairy tale chateau wedding, the glamorous lifestyle she'd built for herself, collapsed faster than she ever imagined. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. They say blood is thicker than water, but what happens when your own daughter treats you like you're not worthy enough to witness the most important day of her life? My name is Caspian Wells. I'm 58 years old, a successful business consultant from Denver, and I raised my daughter Victoria practically single-handedly after my wife Catherine passed away 12 years ago. Tuesday morning started like any other. I was up at 7 coffee brewing, watching the sunrise paint the Rocky Mountains through my kitchen window. At 58, I'd learned to appreciate these quiet moments. The house felt peaceful, settled. Sarah was already at her design studio. We've been together 2 years now. Nothing dramatic, just companionship after loss. Victoria. Just thinking her name brought a smile to my face. My daughter had exceeded every dream I'd ever had for her. 29 years old, a respected French translator, fluent in 3 languages. After Catherine died, Victoria became my whole world. Every sacrifice, every late night, working to pay for her education, it had all been worth it. Her engagement to Jean-Baptiste filled me with pride. A successful French investment banker who clearly adored her. The wedding planning had been a joy to watch from a distance, Paris, she'd said. A chateau overlooking the Seine. When she'd asked for financial help, I hadn't hesitated. $150,000 seemed like a small price for my daughter's happiness. I'd already transferred $80,000 for deposits. The final $70,000 was scheduled to go out next week. My phone chimed with an email notification. Victoria's name appeared in the sender field, no subject line, which was unusual for her. I opened it expecting a wedding update. Instead, I found this. Dad Jean-Baptiste's family has made it clear they don't want you at the wedding since you don't speak French. They think it would be embarrassing having someone who can't participate in conversations. It's better if you just watch the live stream from home. We've set up a Google Meet link so you can still see everything. Should be just like being there. The financial arrangements remain the same, obviously. I stared at the screen, reading those words over and over. My daughter had just banned me from her wedding because I wasn't French enough, not sophisticated enough, not worthy enough to sit in the same room as her new family. But my money, that was still welcome. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Should be just like being there, as if watching my daughter's wedding through a computer screen was the same as walking her down the aisle. As if 12 years of single parenting could be reduced to a live stream viewer. The irony was devastating. Victoria made her living helping people communicate across language barriers, yet she was using my inability to speak French as a weapon to exclude me from the most important day of her life. My hands didn't tremble. I didn't shout or throw the phone. Instead, something cold and final settled in my chest. This wasn't stress or nerves. This was calculated humiliation delivered with surgical precision by the daughter I'd sacrificed everything for. I thought about all those years working overtime to pay for her education, all those French lessons, language camps, study abroad programs, the pride I'd felt when she became successful. Had I been funding my own eventual rejection? The morning sun still streamed through the windows, but everything felt different now. The coffee had gone cold in my cup, or maybe that was just the chill spreading through my chest. I set the phone down carefully and stared at the mountains. 12 years of devoted single parenting, and this was my reward, being told I was too American, too unsophisticated, too embarrassing to witness my own daughter's wedding. But my checkbook was still invited. As I read her words one final time, something fundamental died inside me. The father who would do anything for his child was still there, but he'd just learned the difference between being loved and being used. I couldn't stop staring at that email. Every word felt like a calculated slap, each phrase designed to cut deeper than the last. Jean-Baptiste's family has made it clear they don't want you at the wedding since you don't speak French. Not, we wish you could learn some French. Not, maybe we can arrange a translator. They simply didn't want me there. My own daughter had allowed her future in-laws to exclude me based on language, something I'd never had the privilege of learning because I'd been too busy working to support her dreams. They think it would be embarrassing having someone who can't participate in conversations. Embarrassing. That word hit me like a physical blow. I was an embarrassment to my own daughter. The man who had raised her alone, who had sacrificed weekends and vacations to pay for her education, I was now too embarrassing to be seen at her wedding. The cultural discrimination was breathtaking in its cruelty. Here I was, a successful American businessman who had built a thriving consulting firm, from nothing being dismissed as unsophisticated because I spoke only English. My grandfather had immigrated to this country with hope and determination. My father had served in Vietnam. I'd created jobs, paid taxes, raised a daughter who became everything I'd dreamed she could be. But none of that mattered to the Moreau family. I wasn't French, so I wasn't worthy. I walked to my home office and opened the wedding expense spreadsheet I'd been maintaining. The numbers stared back at me in black and white. Venue deposit $35,000. Paid. Catering advance $25,000. Paid. Photography retainer $12,000. Paid. Floral arrangements $8,000. Paid. Total already transferred $80,000. Remaining balance due $70,000. Grand total $150,000. $150,000 for my daughter's perfect day. The same daughter who had just told me I wasn't sophisticated enough to attend. The financial arrangements remained the same, obviously. Obviously. As if my continued financial support was a given regardless of how they treated me. As if being excluded from my own daughter's wedding wouldn't affect my willingness to pay for it. Victoria wanted my money, but not my presence. She was perfectly happy to have her embarrassing American father fund her European fairy tale as long as he stayed home where the Moreaus wouldn't have to see him. But the cruelest irony was yet to come. I opened my laptop and pulled up Victoria's professional website, something I'd helped her create when she started her translation business, bridging language barriers to bring people together, specializing in French, English, corporate communications, helping businesses and families connect across cultures. I read it twice, the bitter irony burning in my throat. My daughter made her living bridging language gaps. Her entire career was built on the principle that language differences shouldn't divide people, that communication barriers could be overcome with patience and understanding. She helped strangers connect across cultural divides every single day. Yet she had just used my inability to speak French as grounds for excluding me from the most important day of her life. Victoria Wells' professional bridge builder had just burned the most important bridge she'd ever had, the one connecting her to the father who had made everything possible. The woman who helped other families connect across cultures had just disconnected from her own father because he wasn't cultured enough for her new family's standards. I closed the laptop and stared out the window. This wasn't just about a wedding anymore. This was about respect, dignity, and the realization that I had raised someone who could separate love from convenience with surgical precision. My daughter, the bridge builder, had just shown me exactly where I stood in her priorities. I was good enough to fund her dreams, but not sophisticated enough to witness them. As the full weight of her hypocrisy settled over me, I understood something with painful clarity. Victoria had never seen me as her father. She had seen me as her bank account. I sat in my study, staring at Catherine's photograph on the bookshelf. 12 years had passed since I'd lost her, but her presence still filled this room. She'd chosen every book on these shelves, picked out the leather chair where I now sat, wrestling with the hardest decision I'd faced since her funeral. What would Catherine think of what Victoria had become? My wife had been a teacher, patient and kind, but she'd never tolerated disrespect. I remembered when Victoria was 8, rolling her eyes at a restaurant server who'd accidentally brought the wrong order. Catherine had made Victoria apologize, then explained something I'd never forgotten. "Sweetheart," she'd said, "how we treat people says everything about who we are. Kindness isn't optional, it's what makes us human." Catherine had raised Victoria with those values: respect for others regardless of their background or circumstances, appreciation for the people who helped us along the way, gratitude for the sacrifices others made on our behalf. Where had those lessons gone? I picked up Catherine's photo, remembering how she'd worried about spoiling Victoria after her diagnosis. "Don't let guilt make you weak, Caspian," she'd whispered during one of her final hospital stays. "Love her, but don't let her become entitled. She needs to understand that respect is earned, not given." Had I failed her? Had my grief over losing Catherine made me too permissive with Victoria? Had I confused love with enabling mistaken generosity for good parenting? The guilt was crushing. Maybe Victoria's behavior was my fault. Maybe I'd created this monster by never saying no, never setting boundaries, never demanding the respect Catherine had insisted upon. But then I thought about Catherine's reaction to Victoria's email. My wife would have been appalled. She would have seen through the manipulation, immediately recognized the calculated cruelty for what it was. Catherine had never accepted disrespect from anyone, not from difficult parents at school, not from rude strangers, and certainly not from our daughter. "You're not doing her any favors by accepting this," I could almost hear Catherine saying. "You're teaching her that love means being a doormat." The internal war raged on. Part of me wanted to swallow the humiliation pay for the wedding and hope that somehow Victoria would come to her senses after the ceremony. Maybe she'd realize what she'd done. Maybe she'd apologize. But the stronger part of me, the part that had learned from Catherine's strength, knew better. This wasn't about punishment. This was about teaching a lesson that should have been learned years ago. Sarah appeared in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee. She'd been quietly supportive through the morning's revelation, never pushing, never trying to influence my decision. That restraint meant everything to me. "You okay?" she asked, setting a cup on my desk. Catherine always said that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's worst behavior. I said, still holding her photograph. Sarah nodded. "She sounds like a wise woman." She was, and she'd be horrified by what Victoria's become. The truth hit me with startling clarity. I wasn't betraying Catherine's memory by setting boundaries with Victoria. I was honoring it. My wife had tried to teach our daughter about respect and gratitude. By accepting Victoria's treatment, I was undoing everything Catherine had worked to instill. Catherine would want me to stand up for myself. She'd want me to show Victoria that actions have consequences, that respect isn't negotiable, that love doesn't mean accepting abuse. I set the photograph back on the shelf and looked at Sarah. "I know what I need to do." "What's that?" Something Catherine would have done 12 years ago if she'd lived to see this. The decision crystallized with surprising peace. This wasn't about anger or revenge. This was about dignity, self-respect, and honoring the values Catherine had tried to teach us both. Victoria had made her choice when she sent that email. She'd chosen her new family's approval over her father's dignity. She'd chosen financial exploitation over genuine relationship. Now it was my turn to choose. As I sat there, Catherine's wisdom flowing through me, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, absolute certainty about what needed to be done. Thursday afternoon, I walked into the Wells Fargo Private Banking Center downtown. The marble floors and mahogany panels felt different today. I wasn't here as a grateful client. I was here as a man reclaiming his dignity. Mr. Wells. Charles Morrison rose from behind his desk. We'd done business together for 15 years. He'd helped structure my consulting firm's finances and handled international transactions for my clients. Charles, I need your help with something urgent. Of course. What can I do for you? I settled into the leather chair across from his desk. I need to cancel the letter of credit we established for Victoria's wedding vendors in Paris. Charles blinked, clearly surprised. The one guaranteeing payments to the chateau and catering services? That's quite substantial to cancel. May I ask what's changed? The circumstances have changed. I need it canceled immediately. Charles pulled up the account on his computer. Let me review. Yes, here it is. $150,000 in total commitments. We've already processed $80,000 in payments to various vendors. I understand. I want the remaining $70,000 guarantee revoked. Mr. Wells, you understand this will immediately void all pending contracts with the Paris vendors. They'll receive automatic notification that the payment guarantee has been withdrawn. That's exactly what I want. Charles leaned back, studying my face. In 15 years of business, he'd learned to read my moods. This is quite unusual for you. You've always been extremely generous with family matters. Sometimes generosity becomes enabling, Charles. I've learned the difference. He nodded slowly. Well, we can execute this immediately. The letter of credit hasn't reached its payment deadlines yet. You're about 10 days ahead of when vendors would expect final transfers. Perfect timing. Victoria would have no warning, no chance to scramble for alternative funding. What about my legal exposure? None whatsoever, Charles assured me. You were the guarantor, not the contracting party. Your daughter and her fiancé are the actual parties to these vendor agreements. When we revoke the guarantee, vendors will contact them directly about payment. And if they can't pay, the contracts become void. Venues get released, services get canceled. Standard international business practice. I felt calm satisfaction settle over me. This wasn't emotional revenge. This was a calculated business decision. I was withdrawing financial support from people who had made it clear I wasn't welcome. Are you absolutely certain about this decision? Charles asked, fingers poised over the keyboard. Once I execute this, it's immediate and irreversible. I thought about Victoria's email, about being told I was too embarrassing to attend my own daughter's wedding, about the casual cruelty of it should be just like being there. I've never been more certain about anything in my life. For 20 minutes, I signed papers and provided verbal authorizations. Each signature felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd given away too freely. The process was surprisingly simple, just paperwork that would unravel months of wedding planning. It's done, Charles said, finally printing confirmation documents. All vendors will receive notification within the hour. The letter of credit is officially revoked. I stood and shook his hand. Thank you, Charles. I appreciate your discretion. Always. And for what it's worth, sometimes the hardest business decisions are the right ones. As I walked out of the bank, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the quiet power that comes from refusing to be used. Victoria had taught me that respect was negotiable. I was about to teach her that, so was my financial support. The wheels were in motion. In 10 days, when the payment deadline arrived and no money appeared, Victoria would learn what it felt like to face consequences for her choices. The next 10 days passed with surreal normalcy. I went to work, attended meetings, had dinner with Sarah, maintained my regular routine, but underneath the surface I carried a quiet anticipation that felt both foreign and strangely liberating. Victoria called every day, completely unaware of what I'd done. The following Tuesday, 5 days after my visit to the bank, she called with her usual excitement. "Dad, you won't believe how beautiful the chateau looks," she gushed. "The florist showed us the arrangements yesterday, and they're absolutely stunning. Jean-Baptiste's mother actually teared up when she saw them. I made appropriate sounds of interest, letting her paint pictures of a wedding I'd never see funded by money that would never arrive. Wednesday brought updates about the photographer. He's flying in from Milan," she continued. "He's done work for French Vogue. Can you believe it? My wedding in Vogue-level photography." "That sounds wonderful," I replied, my voice steady. By Thursday, she was discussing the menu. 5 courses, Dad. The chef trained under Daniel Boulud. Jean-Baptiste says it's the kind of meal that makes people remember a wedding forever. It certainly would be memorable, though not for the reasons she imagined. The dramatic irony was almost unbearable. Victoria was planning every detail of her perfect day, completely oblivious that the financial foundation supporting it had been quietly removed. She spoke with such confidence, such certainty that everything would unfold exactly as she envisioned. Friday's call included the crucial detail. The final payment goes through Monday, she mentioned casually as if discussing the weather. Then it's just 2 more weeks until the big day, Monday, the day vendors would discover no payment was coming. That same Friday afternoon, Brad Harrison stopped by my office, settling into the chair across from my desk, with the familiarity of 30 years of friendship. "You seem different lately," he observed, studying my face. "Calmer somehow, more settled." "Do I?" "Yeah, like you've made peace with something that was bothering you." He paused. "Everything okay with Victoria's wedding?" I chose my words carefully. "Everything's exactly as it should be." Brad raised an eyebrow. He'd known me long enough to recognize when I was being deliberately vague. "That's an interesting way to put it." "Sometimes the most important decisions are the ones that restore balance," I said. He nodded slowly, not pressing for details, but understanding that something significant was happening. "Well, whatever it is, it suits you. You look like a man who's found his backbone again." That weekend, 9 days after canceling the letter of credit, Victoria called with final details. The excitement in her voice was infectious, even knowing what I knew. "Jean-Baptiste's entire family is flying in from Lan," she said. 37 people. "They're so sophisticated, Dad. You'd love meeting them, but you know how it is with the language thing?" Actually, I knew exactly how it was. Sunday evening, I sat on my back porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Tomorrow, the vendors would expect their final payments. Tomorrow, Victoria's perfect world would begin to crack. I felt no guilt, no second thoughts. Just a deep sense of rightness, like a compass needle finally pointing true north. Sarah joined me with 2 glasses of wine. "Penny for your thoughts." "Just thinking about lessons," I said. "How sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their choices." She squeezed my hand gently. "Your daughter's going to learn something important soon, isn't she?" "Yes, she is." Monday morning, exactly 10 days after my visit to Wells Fargo, arrived crisp and clear. I made my coffee, read the news, prepared for another normal day at the office. But this wasn't a normal day. This was the day Victoria would discover that actions have consequences, that respect isn't optional, and that her father wasn't the pushover she'd believed him to be. Somewhere in Paris, vendors were checking their accounts and finding them empty. The phone would ring soon. The call came Wednesday morning. I was in my office reviewing quarterly reports when my phone buzzed. Victoria's name appeared on the screen. 2 days had passed since the payment deadline, exactly the time frame Charles had predicted for vendor reactions. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Dad." Victoria's voice was strained, higher pitched than usual. "I need to talk to you. Something's wrong with the wedding payments." "What kind of wrong?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "The chateau called this morning. They said they haven't received the final payment, but that's impossible. You guaranteed everything, right? They're threatening to cancel our booking." I leaned back in my chair. "Did they say anything else?" "The caterer called too, and the photographer. Dad, they're all saying the same thing. No payment received. They're talking about canceling everything." Her voice cracked with panic. "This has to be some kind of banking error. Have you checked with Jean-Baptiste?" "Maybe there's been a miscommunication. He's in meetings all morning. Dad, I need you to call the bank right now. Fix this, please." The desperation in her voice was palpable. For the first time since sending that cruel email, Victoria needed her father. Not his money. Well, actually exactly his money, but she needed him to solve her problem. "Victoria, I think there's something you should know. What Dad just called the bank. We can talk later. Dad has canceled the letter of credit." Silence. Complete absolute silence. What? Her voice was barely a whisper. "I revoked the payment guarantee. The vendors have been notified that no further payments will be coming from me." You can't do that. The wedding is in 2 weeks." "I can and I did." "But why, Dad? This is my wedding. You promised." "I promised to pay for a wedding I was invited to attend." "You uninvited me. Remember? You told me I was too embarrassing for your new family." "That's not—" "We can fix that." "You can come, Dad. Please, you have to fix this." Interesting how quickly her position changed when money was involved. "Victoria, the decision is final." "This is because of Sarah, isn't it?" Her voice turned sharp, desperate. "You're choosing that woman over your own daughter. This has nothing to do with Sarah. This is about respect." "Respect I'm your daughter." Yes, you are. And you told me I wasn't sophisticated enough to witness your wedding. You reduced me to a live stream viewer while expecting me to fund your perfect day. I could hear her crying, now the reality of her situation finally sinking in. Jean-Baptiste is going to kill me, she sobbed. His family, oh God, his family is going to be so angry. She was right about that. The next call came Friday afternoon. This time Victoria's voice was hollow, defeated. It's over, she said simply. What's over? Everything. The engagement, the wedding. Jean-Baptiste's mother called an emergency family meeting yesterday. She said the Wells family has proven to be unreliable and financially unstable. They're calling off the wedding. I felt a moment of surprise. I'd expected consequences, but not this swift or complete. And Jean-Baptiste, he said he can't marry into a family that embarrasses his relatives. He said you humiliated them by pulling funding at the last minute. Her laugh was bitter. Funny how it's your fault, not mine. What about the money you have saved? $8,000, Dad. I have $8,000. The chateau alone costs $85,000. I lived off your generosity for so long, I never learned to save properly. The admission hung between us like a confession. Jean-Baptiste returned the ring yesterday, she continued, her voice flat, via messenger. He couldn't even face me. His mother sent a note saying the Moreau family cannot associate with people of questionable character and reliability. I'm sorry it ended this way, Victoria. Are you because you got exactly what you wanted? You destroyed my wedding, my engagement, my future. I didn't destroy anything. I simply stopped paying for my own exclusion. The line went quiet for a long moment. I hate you, she whispered, then hung up. I set the phone down and stared out my office window. In less than a week, Victoria had lost her wedding, her fiancé, and her illusions about unconditional financial support. She'd learned that actions have consequences. It was a lesson 12 years overdue. The fallout was swift and merciless. Within days of Victoria's engagement being called off, my phone began ringing with calls from extended family. Word traveled fast. A canceled wedding, a broken engagement, and the daughter who had excluded her own father. My sister Margaret called first. Caspian, I heard about Victoria's wedding. What happened? I gave her the facts. Victoria had uninvited me due to language barriers. I'd withdrawn financial support. The wedding collapsed. She uninvited you from your own daughter's wedding. Margaret's voice rose in disbelief. After everything you've done for her, that's correct. Good for you for standing up to her. That girl has been spoiled rotten since Catherine died. Similar conversations followed with cousins, aunts, and family friends. The universal reaction was shock at Victoria's behavior and support for my decision. Holiday invitations that would normally include Victoria quietly stopped coming. Family gatherings continued without her. Victoria's professional life began cracking too. The translation industry in Denver was smaller than people realized, and word of family instability spread among corporate clients. My business associate, Robert Martinez, mentioned it casually. Caspian, we heard there were personal issues affecting Victoria's reliability. We're reconsidering our contract with her firm. What kind of issues? Family drama affecting professional commitments. Clients are nervous about instability. I didn't defend her. Victoria had made her choices. The financial reality hit hardest. Victoria had lived so comfortably off my subsidies that she'd never learned proper budgeting. Her apartment rent alone was $2,800 monthly, manageable when Dad quietly covered half impossible on translator income alone. 2 weeks after our last conversation, Victoria showed up at my office building. Security called. She was in the lobby asking to see me. Tell her I'm unavailable. She says it's urgent, Mr. Wells, family emergency. Tell her to make an appointment through proper channels. That evening she appeared at my house, sitting on my front steps for 2 hours. I stayed at Sarah's that night. The desperate emails began arriving daily. Dad, please call me. I know I made mistakes, but we're family. I'm losing clients because of this situation. I can't afford my apartment anymore. I need help. I'm sorry about the wedding invitation. I was wrong. Each email revealed her deteriorating situation. The entitled young woman who had casually excluded her father was discovering life without his financial safety net. But the manipulative emails bothered me most. Mom would want us to work this out. You're destroying our family over one mistake. Sarah has poisoned you against your own daughter. These attempts to weaponize Catherine's memory and blame Sarah only strengthened my resolve. Victoria still didn't understand this was about her behavior, not external influences. The final attempt came 3 weeks after the collapse. Victoria cornered me in my office parking lot. Dad, please, I'm desperate. She looked it. Thinner, tired, wearing old clothes instead of expensive outfits. I lost 3 major clients this week. I can't make rent. I can't afford groceries. I know I hurt you, but I'm your daughter. Yes, you are my daughter, and I raised you to treat people with respect and gratitude. You chose to do neither. I was wrong about the wedding, I admit it. But this punishment has gone too far. This isn't punishment, Victoria. These are consequences. There's a difference. What's the difference? Punishment is something I do to you. Consequences are something you do to yourself. She stared at me, tears streaming. So that's it. You're just going to let me lose everything. You already lost everything that mattered. The rest is just money and convenience. I walked away, leaving her in the parking lot. As I drove home, I felt no satisfaction in her suffering, but no guilt either. Victoria was learning what independence actually cost, and it was a lesson 12 years overdue. The daughter who had made her living, bridging cultural gaps, had burned the most important bridge of all, the one connecting her to the father who had made everything possible. 6 months later, I woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside my bedroom window. The morning light felt different somehow, softer, more peaceful. At 58, I'd learned that true contentment comes not from avoiding difficult decisions, but from making the right ones, even when they hurt. Victoria and I hadn't spoken since that parking lot confrontation. Through the family grapevine, I'd heard she'd moved to a smaller apartment across town, was slowly rebuilding her client base, and had taken a part-time job at a language learning center to make ends meet. She was learning what financial independence actually meant, the hard way, but perhaps the only way that would stick. I felt no satisfaction in her struggles, but no guilt either. Well, that wasn't entirely true. Late at night when the house was quiet, I sometimes wondered if I'd failed her in a different way years ago. Maybe I had spoiled her too much after Catherine died, letting guilt over her mother's death turn me into a pushover instead of a parent. Maybe if I'd set boundaries earlier, taught her gratitude and respect when she was younger, none of this would have happened. But dwelling on past mistakes wouldn't change anything. Victoria was 29 years old enough to understand that actions have consequences, old enough to learn from them. Sarah and I had grown closer through all of this. She'd never once suggested I reconcile with Victoria, never pushed me to fix the relationship. Instead, she'd simply supported my decision to maintain boundaries. That restraint, that respect for my choices meant everything to me. "You're different now," she told me one evening as we sat on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. "More settled, like you've found something you'd lost." She was right. I had found something. My self-respect. For 12 years after Catherine's death, I'd confused love with enabling mistaken generosity for good parenting. I'd been so afraid of losing Victoria that I'd never demanded she treat me with basic human dignity. The business was thriving. Without the constant drain of Victoria's emergencies and urgent needs, I'd been able to focus on growing my consulting practice. Clients respected the way I'd handled my personal situation. Word had gotten around about my principled stand, and it had actually enhanced my professional reputation. Brad Harrison stopped by the office regularly, and he'd noticed the change too. "You know what I admire about what you did," he said during one of our lunch meetings. "You didn't do it in anger. You did it with dignity. That's the difference between revenge and justice." He was right. This had never been about hurting Victoria. It had been about teaching her that respect isn't optional, that love doesn't mean accepting abuse, and that financial support comes with the expectation of basic human decency. The extended family had rallied around my decision completely. Holiday gatherings were actually more peaceful without Victoria's drama and entitled attitude. My sister Margaret had put it best. "Caspian, you didn't lose a daughter. You stopped enabling someone who was using you." Sometimes I wondered if Victoria had learned anything from this experience. I hoped she had, but I couldn't control that. I could only control my own choices, my own boundaries, my own self-respect. People often asked if I missed her. The honest answer was complicated. I missed the daughter I'd raised, the little girl who used to practice French at our kitchen table. But I didn't miss the entitled young woman who had treated me like a bank account with legs. If Victoria ever genuinely changed, if she ever developed real gratitude, real respect, real understanding of what she'd done, maybe we could have a relationship again someday. But it would have to be on terms of mutual respect, not financial dependence. As I sat in my study that evening, looking at Catherine's photograph, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, complete peace, with my decisions. I hadn't destroyed my daughter's wedding. I had simply stopped paying for my own exclusion. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their choices. And sometimes the most important lesson a parent can teach is that respect isn't negotiable, not even from family, especially not from family. You don't have to burn yourself to keep others warm. Sometimes life teaches us the hardest lessons through the people we love most. Caspian's story reminds us that true love sometimes means setting boundaries even with family. As it says in Proverbs, "Whoever spares the rod hates his child, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him." God gives us wisdom to know when generosity becomes enabling, when kindness becomes weakness. This betrayal story isn't just about a father and daughter. It's about the universal struggle between unconditional love and conditional respect. Like many grandpa stories passed down through generations, it carries timeless wisdom about dignity and self-worth. Our grandfathers understood something we've forgotten. Respect isn't negotiable, not even from those we've sacrificed everything for. In betrayal stories like this one, we see how financial manipulation can destroy the most sacred bonds. But we also see redemption, not through reconciliation, but through self-respect. God doesn't call us to be doormats. He calls us to love wisely. As Scripture teaches, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. The most profound grandpa stories often end not with happy reunions, but with hard-won peace. Caspian learned what his own grandfather knew: you don't have to burn yourself to keep others warm. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their choices. God blesses those who choose dignity over desperation, boundaries over enabling. What's your take on Caspian's decision? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect? Share your thoughts. Below, hit that subscribe button for more powerful stories. And let us know, was he right to cancel the wedding funding?